In the heart of Shanghai, the grand yet fading walls of Huashan Medical Center stood as a towering presence. By day, its marble floors gleamed under the sunlight, and the corridors echoed with hurried footsteps and polite greetings. Yet by night, whispers lingered like shadows, and the air seemed heavier than the silence that filled it. Dr. Li Wei, a newly appointed surgeon, had always admired the reputation of Huashan. It was known as a beacon of excellence, a place where the most brilliant minds had saved countless lives. But within his first week, subtle signs began to disturb him. Files were often missing from the archive, patients were transferred without explanation, and nurses exchanged guarded glances whenever his questions lingered too long. One evening, while reviewing post-surgery notes, Dr. Li noticed something troubling. A patient's report had been altered, the ink still faintly smudged, as if changed in haste. The signature beneath did not belong to the doctor in charge. His heart tightened. In medical practice, details were sacred, and any tampering meant danger. Later that night, while crossing the dimly lit corridor, he overheard two senior physicians speaking in hushed tones. He caught only fragments, words like containment and unauthorized trial. The conversation ceased abruptly when they sensed his presence, their faces stiff, their smiles forced. Dr. Li told himself he must not overthink. Perhaps he was simply inexperienced, perhaps there were explanations he had not yet learned. But deep inside he knew. Something dark lay beneath the polished image of Huashan Medical Center, and the first crack in its perfect facade had already revealed itself before his very eyes. The following morning, Dr. Li was assigned to Ward 7, a restricted wing he had not entered before. The hall smelled faintly of disinfectant mixed with something metallic, a scent that clung to the walls like an echo. His first patient there was a young woman named Mei Lin. She lay pale against the sheets, her wrists marked by faint bruises. No family accompanied her, and the file at the end of her bed seemed almost deliberately incomplete. When Dr. Li flipped through the pages, the sections for medical history and next of kin were blank. "Doctor," May whispered as he checked her pulse, "they told me not to speak, but you must know this is not treatment." Her eyes darted towards the ceiling as if unseen ears were listening from above. Before he could ask more, the head nurse entered swiftly, her expression calm but her grip on the chart firm. "This patient requires rest," she said, her tone allowing no argument. She closed the file with a snap and guided Dr. Li away. Yet as they stepped into the corridor, he felt a slip of paper pressed into his palm. Mei Lin had managed to slip it to him unnoticed. He opened it later in his office. In hurried strokes of ink, it read, "They are hiding us. Find the basement." A chill ran through him. Patients without pasts, files without records, whispers about containment. The pieces were no longer scattered fragments. They were forming the outline of a secret that could shatter the hospital's shining reputation. Night settled over Shanghai, and the glow of neon lights outside painted shifting colors on the hospital's tall windows. Dr. Li moved quietly through the corridors, Mei Lin's note burning in his pocket like a secret flame. Each step echoed against the marble floor, and each shadow felt like a pair of unseen eyes. He found himself in the Eastern Wing, where few patients were kept and the silence was deeper. At the end of the corridor, hidden behind a row of storage crates, stood a narrow metal door. It bore no sign, no number, and the padlock was newer than the frame that held it. His hands trembled as he brushed dust from the handle. Just as he leaned closer, a voice broke the silence. "Dr. Li, it is late. You should not be here." It was Dr. Chun, one of the senior physicians. His face was kind, but his eyes held a warning. "Some doors are not for you. Trust me, curiosity will bring nothing but danger." Li forced a smile, murmuring an apology. Yet as he walked away, his heart pounded with questions. Why was the door hidden? Why was it locked in a hospital that claimed transparency? That night, sleep refused to come. The image of the basement door pressed against his mind. He knew he had crossed a threshold. What lay beyond it could no longer be ignored. The following day, Dr. Li returned to his duties with an outward calm, Yet his mind wandered to the locked basement door. If he could not open it, perhaps the hospital's records would reveal what it concealed. He slipped into the archives during lunch hour, when most staff gathered in the canteen. The room smelled of paper and dust, its shelves rising high with decades of files. He searched for Ward 7, but the folders ended abruptly 5 years ago, as if the patients admitted since then had been swallowed by silence. A faint sound startled him. Someone else was in the room. He crouched low, peering through the shelves. A nurse he did not recognize was hurriedly placing files into a black case. Her movements were swift, almost frantic, and when the latch clicked shut, she pressed her finger to her lips as if silencing a ghost. Before leaving, she dropped one folder. Dr. Lee waited until the door closed, then reached for it. The name on the cover was Mei Lin. His breath caught as he opened the pages. Instead of a medical history, the notes described candidate numbers and tolerance levels. The handwriting was coded, clinical, and cold. These were not records of healing. They were reports of trials. The door, the missing files, the whispered word containment, all of it circled the same secret. Huashan was not only a hospital. Somewhere deep inside its walls, something was being tested on the living. Dr. Lee walked past Ward 7 again the next evening, pretending to check his rounds. Most of the lights were dimmed, and only a faint hum of machines seeped through the half-closed doors. The silence was unnatural, too perfect, as if the patients inside had been muted. He dared to step into one of the rooms. A man lay motionless on the bed, his eyes open but empty, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Tubes ran from his arms to a machine unlike any Lee had seen before. The device emitted a steady pulse, its screen filled with strange symbols instead of medical data. "Help me," the man rasped, his lips barely moving. But before Lee could speak, another figure entered, the same unknown nurse who had stolen the files. Her expression flickered with alarm when she saw him, but instead of calling for help, she whispered, "Leave now. They will know you were here." Her words chilled him more than a threat could. Someone, somewhere, was watching every step. He retreated quickly, but his mind clung to the patient's eyes, trapped, aware, and begging. The silent wing was no ordinary ward. It was a prison in disguise. Later that night, as Dr. Lee prepared to leave the hospital, the same mysterious nurse appeared at the end of the corridor. Her cap was pulled low, and her steps were hurried. Without a word, she slipped a folded envelope into his pocket and vanished into the stairwell. Inside the envelope were fragments of patient charts, each page marked with the same phrase, Project Longevity. The files showed names, ages, and conditions, yet every outcome ended with a single line, status, terminated. The weight of the truth pressed against him. This was not treatment. These were experiments. The patients were not meant to heal. They were meant to endure. That night, he met the nurse again in a deserted courtyard behind the hospital. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "You're not safe, Dr. Lee. They have seen you asking questions. If you value your life, you must leave this place." But his thoughts returned to Mei Lin, the young woman with the desperate eyes. Leaving meant abandoning her and countless others. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. For a moment, she hesitated, then whispered, "Because I was once a patient too." Her words struck like a blade through the dark. The system had devoured her once, and yet she still remained within its walls. Rain lashed against the hospital windows, the storm outside echoing the turmoil within Dr. Lee's mind. He could no longer stand idle. That night, he returned to the eastern wing, where the locked basement door waited like a silent sentinel. The nurse's warning echoed in his ears, but curiosity and duty drove him forward. He had stolen a set of old keys from the maintenance office, praying one of them might fit. His hands shook as he tried the first, then the second. At the third, the lock clicked open with a sound that seemed too loud in the empty corridor. The door creaked as it swung inward, revealing a staircase plunging into darkness. The air was damp and heavy, carrying the faint scent of chemicals and rust. Each step down felt like a descent into a world untouched by sunlight, a place that had been deliberately hidden from view. At the bottom, Faint lights flickered along a narrow corridor. Behind thick glass windows lay rooms filled with equipment, restraints, monitors, and machines that hummed with quiet menace. Shadows shifted behind the glass, shapes of people strapped to beds, their faces pale, their eyes wide with silent screams. Dr. Lee's stomach churned. This was no hospital. It was a laboratory. As he stood frozen, a sharp sound echoed through the hall, the unmistakable click of shoes approaching from behind. Someone else was coming down the stairs. Dr. Lee ducked into the shadows as the footsteps drew closer. A figure appeared at the bottom of the staircase, tall and composed, his white coat gleaming even in the dim light. It was Dr. Zhao, the hospital's director. Zhao moved with calm authority, inspecting the glass chambers as if they were exhibits in a private collection. He paused by one of the restrained patients, taking notes with a steady hand. His voice, low and deliberate, echoed through the corridor. Subject 32. Response to serum remains unstable. Increased dosage tomorrow. Dr. Lee's heart pounded. The man he had admired as a pioneer of medicine was the architect of this hidden nightmare. Zhao turned to another chamber, his tone colder still. Failure is acceptable. Disposal must be swift. No trace left above ground. Lee gripped the wall, forcing himself not to move. The truth was sharper than any scalpel. This was Project Longevity. It was not about curing disease, but about bending human life into experiments of endurance. At last, Zhao stopped before the very door where Lee hid. For a moment, the director's eyes lingered on the darkness, as if sensing another presence. Then, with a faint smirk, he whispered to himself, "Curiosity always finds its way down here." And then he walked on, his footsteps fading into the depths. Lee exhaled shakily. He had glimpsed the heart of the secret, but now he knew discovery was only a matter of time. Dr. Lee staggered back into his office, his thoughts in chaos. The images of the basement burned into his memory, pale faces trapped behind glass, the voice of Dr. Zhao speaking of disposal like it were routine. The truth was too monstrous to keep inside, yet too dangerous to speak aloud. A soft knock pulled him from his thoughts. The nurse slipped inside quickly, her face pale under the dim lamp. "You went down there, didn't you?" she whispered. He nodded. The silence between them was heavy, filled with things neither wanted to say. Finally, she handed him another folded paper. "There is a way out for the patients. A transport tunnel beneath the basement. It connects to the old supply route that leads beyond the compound." Lee stared at her, stunned. "Why tell me this?" "Because if we do nothing, they will all die," she replied, her voice shaking. "Mei Lin is scheduled for the serum tomorrow. Once it begins, she will not survive." The word struck him like a blow. The experiments were accelerating. Time was slipping away. He tightened his fists, resolve cutting through his fear. "Then we get them out tonight." The nurse's eyes glistened. For the first time, she allowed herself a faint, fragile smile. But her next words carried the weight of doom. "If they catch us, there will be no mercy." The storm outside raged harder than ever, thunder shaking the windows of Huashan Medical Center. Dr. Lee and the nurse moved swiftly through the silent corridors, their footsteps masked by the roar of the rain. Hidden beneath their coats were stolen keys and a single torch. They reached the basement door once more, the lock opening under trembling hands. Inside, the patients lay in shadowed rows, their eyes flickering open as if sensing hope had finally arrived. Mei Lin's gaze met Lee's, a spark of life breaking through her fear. Together, they freed as many as they could, unstrapping wrists and pulling tubes from trembling arms. The nurse guided them towards the far wall, where a steel hatch lay half-buried beneath crates. With effort, it opened to reveal a narrow passage leading into darkness. Just as the first patient crawled inside, a voice thundered through the chamber. "Enough!" Dr. Zhao stood at the doorway, flanked by guards in white coats. His eyes gleamed with fury and cold amusement. "You disappoint me, Dr. Lee. I thought you might prove loyal. Instead, you choose betrayal." Lee stepped forward, shielding the patients with his body. His heart pounded, but his voice held steady. This is not medicine. This is cruelty. The guards advanced, and chaos erupted. Alarms wailed. Red lights bathed the basement in an eerie glow. Patients stumbled into the tunnel, urged forward by the nurses' desperate cries. Li fought to buy them seconds, each heartbeat a battle. And then, just as Zhao reached for him, the storm outside cut the power. Darkness swallowed the chamber, broken only by the flicker of lightning. In that moment, the tunnel hatch slammed shut, sealing the escape. Dr. Li's fate hung in the shadows, but somewhere beyond the walls of Huashan, hope had been carried into the storm.